Abundant archaeological evidence confirms the presence of early humans in what is now Côte d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast. Groups in the north were drawn to the trans-Saharan trade networks of the Ghana and Mali empires. Islam arrived with Malinki merchants as trade expanded. Mali's collapse in the 16th century resulted in the Great Upheaval that sent waves of migrants southward, where they founded new kingdoms in the hinterlands of the forest zone. The original inhabitants were either displaced or assimilated by these new groups. Important kingdoms flourished in the pre-colonial period. In the Savannah country, towns developed around communities of Diula traders. Kong existed for several centuries before Sekou Otara and his sons established a new dynasty there in the early 18th century. Kong lasted until 1897 when it was destroyed by Samori Touré, who in the process of creating a new Muslim empire that included what is now northern Côte d'Ivoire. The Buna Kingdom was created in the late 17th century. It, along with Khan, became a major center of Islamic learning. The wars associated with the rise of the Asante Empire in the late 17th century led to the migration of numerous Akan peoples into the forest regions of Côte d'Ivoire. The most powerful of the states established was the Abron Kingdom of Guillemon. It was conquered by the Asantes in the 1730s, and despite numerous revolts, remained subject to it until 1875. In much of the same circumstances, the Anyi kingdoms of Indini and Sanwi were founded. Founding the death in 1750 of the ruler of the Asante, a succession struggle in Kumasi forced one contender and her supporters to enter the north central part of Côte d'Ivoire. They founded the Balai Kingdom, remarkable for its blending of Akan and local traditions. Until the 19th century, European contact was confined to the coast, where French and Portuguese traders sought ivory and people to enslave. A French person began signing treaties with coastal chiefs in the 1830s that allowed France to build ports and trading posts. France withdrew in 1870, but private merchants remained. Arthur Verdier sent explorers north and imported the first coffee plants. By the 1890s, inland penetration by traders and military missions such in 1887 to 1889 resulted in more treaties and French protectorate relationships with many groups. As the European rush to divide Africa accelerated, France claimed Côte d'Ivoire as a colony in 1893. Borders were determined in 1898. Following the capture of Samori Touré, the governor began a military occupation in 1908. Imposition of forced labor and head taxes led to fierce resistance, especially among the Balai, Ani, and Abe. New revolts broke out when France conscripted thousands of Ivorians to serve with other Western African soldiers in World War I. France's superior weaponry eventually triumphed, although the colony was not considered under control until 1918. Following World War I, concerted efforts towards economic development were taken. The railway was extended to Bobo Dioulasso, which is in modern-day Burkina Faso, which, along with most of Upper Volta, was attached to Côte d'Ivoire in 1933. Schools and Western-style health facilities were introduced, exploitation of the forests were intensified, and Africans were encouraged to plant cash crops for export. By 1939, Africans grew 90% of the cocoa and 80% of the coffee produced in the colony. 45,000 Ivorians fought for the French army during World War II. Between 1940 and 1942, the colony, along with the rest of French West Africa, chose to remain under the Vichy government. Racist legislation, economic discrimination against African planters, increased forced labor, and a depression caused by Britain's naval blockade created enormous discontent. Educated Africans thus welcomed the subsequent Free French regime. In 1944, two people formed the African Farmers Union, or the SAA, which, with the support of the colony's governor, secured equal treatment for African planters. The two people's all-African slate swept local elections in 1945. The following year, with Côte d'Ivoire part of the French Union, he was elected to the French Assembly, where he spearheaded the law to abolish forced labor throughout the empire. The present borders were set in 1947, when the north reverted to the country of Upper Volta. In 1946, the same people helped found the African Democratic Rally, or the RDA, a Western Africa-based umbrella organization that sought equality for Africans. The Ivorian branch was the Democratic Party of Côte d'Ivoire. Though at first harshly repressed, the RDA achieved many of its goals. Côte d'Ivoire became independent on August 7th, 1960, and the same people that have created all of these factions and such, who had been cabinet members in two French governments, one of them was elected president of the newly independent country. He ruled until his death in 1993 during his 7th term in office. Despite reported coup attempts in 1963 and 1973, he had a remarkable ability to reconcile opponents, which sustained the country's peaceful and prosperous relations with France and with its neighbors throughout most of its rule. However, political unrest and strained foreign relations were increasingly evident from the late 1980s. Côte d'Ivoire's first multi-party elections were held in 1990, and the former president managed to defeat challengers of the Ivorian Popular Front in the presidential election that was unsuccessfully appealed to the Supreme Court. Upon his death in 1993, he was succeeded by the president of the National Assembly, who was, like his predecessor, a member of the Bali ethnic group and the PDCI. That is pretty much it for the Ivory Coast history, because the rest is just, like most countries, more leaders, some unrest, and minor things that don't matter as much. So anyways, that is it for the history of Côte d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast.